Welcome to day 9 of the Kickstart Challenge. Raise your standards. Raise your standards. If you don't have a baseline standard for what you'll accept in your life, you'll find it easy to slip into the behaviors, the attitudes, and the quality of life that is far below what you deserve. Base your standards. Many of us base our standards on the environment. You know, who you spend time with is who you become. Check your circle. Who are those 5 closest people to you that you hang around with? We base our standards on our environment, on who we're around and who we most spend time with. Gradually, subconsciously, we lower our standards to fit the people around us. Maybe it's some family members. Maybe it's some best friends or some old friends that are still in our lives. We base our standards on those around us, right? So what is the standard that you're living by in your life? What standard are you living by? You know, an example of the standard American way, right? We wake up, we drag ourselves to work, we come home, we pay our bills, right? We just make enough money to pay our bills and to get by. We might turn on the television, come home, turn on the television, maybe drink some alcohol, sleep, and then repeat. The standard American way for our lives, the mediocre way, right? You know, our bodies, how we look physically, are a reflection of our personal standards for our lives. Our finances are the standard that we are currently holding in our lives. Our relationships, loved relationships, family relationships, co-workers, friends, the quality of those relationships are the quality of our lives. What are your standards? What standards are you living by? You know, Tony Robbins has an amazing quote. He says, when the pain of staying the same becomes worse than the pain of changing, then we make a new change. You know, we don't make a change when we're comfortable, when we're okay with that mediocre standard of way of living. We don't make a change that way. We finally wake up when that pain of staying the same becomes worse than the pain of changing. And then we will get up off our behind and make that change to improve that quality of that life, to raise the standard for our health and our mental well-being and the forever quality of our life consistently on a long-term basis. You know, we need to turn our shoulds. You know, we always say, oh, I should get more sleep. I should pay the bills on time. I should spend more time with my children. I should do this. I should do that. I've heard somebody say we should all over ourselves, right? We need to turn our shoulds into musts. It has to be a must. It has to be the standard where we will not back down. You know, we don't get our goals. You know, on my wall up there in my room, I have a goal list by my bed. And it has my goals for 2020. I've achieved about half of those, but not the other half. And it's because I didn't have that standard. That wasn't a must for me. Half of them were I was absolute certain that I must achieve those. The other half, it wasn't my standard. Okay? It wasn't a must for me. So I didn't achieve them. Right? And I think of all the greats, you know, I think of all the greats in history who stood up, who said no more. Rosa Parks, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, Helen Keller, Albert Einstein, you know, all of these people, they raised their standards. They said enough is enough. I'm no longer going to live this low quality of life. I'm no longer going to allow my environment to dictate my standards. I'm going to raise my standards, right? Tony Robbins, again, has a short story I want to share with you. So he was a speaker, and in his early days, he had an event in New York City. And the event ended, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and he was like so pumped, right? Because he knew all about state change. So he was so pumped after his event that he took a walk. So he was in New York City, he took a walk down the street. And he was walking, and the way he described his walk reminded me. So as Tony was walking down the street, he saw this gentleman walking towards him. And the way he described it, it reminded me of the movie Home Alone. I think it was the second one, when Kevin was in New York City and Kevin was walking down the sidewalk in New York City, and he saw the prostitutes. He saw, I think, this man on a wheelchair that he ran into, and he was like, "Watch it, kid, ha ha ha." Do you guys remember that? I've seen that movie 100 times. And then Kevin saw this, he looked up and he saw this gentleman walking towards him in a trench coat, and it was dark, and he was just walking towards him, so I'm assuming it was somebody homeless, maybe. But Tony described, he was walking down the street and he saw this homeless man in a trench coat walking towards him. And the gentleman came up to Tony and he said, "Sir, do you have a quarter?" And Tony was like, "Is that all you want, is a quarter?" And the homeless man said, "Yes, a quarter. That's all I want. A quarter will change my whole life." And Tony was thinking in his head, he's like, should I give him the money? Should I not? But then Tony, made the decision that he gives money. In his early days in his career, this is what his experience was, and I'm sharing it with you here, guys. So he reached in his pocket. He was just starting his business and his brand at that time, so he pulled out his money, and he had a wad of cash, and he had $100 bills on the outside. And I don't know if his change was in his pocket, but he pulled it out and he pulled a quarter, and he said, "Here," he gave the quarter to the man, and then he put the $100 bills back in his pocket, and the homeless man was looking at him, and he looked at his pocket, and he looked at him again, and he said, "Sir, you're weird," and then he walked off. And Tony was trying to teach this man a lesson, but the homeless man, he probably didn't get the lesson. I don't know, maybe he did later on. But Tony was trying to teach him that life will pay any price that you ask of it. If we ask for a quarter, we're going to get a quarter. Many of us say, like your New Year's resolutions, many of us say, "Oh, I want to lose weight." Well, you lost a pound, you've reached your goal, right? So when we have low standards, when we have low goals, when we're not specific enough, or when they are so low, guys, we need to raise the standards. So this homeless guy, he only asked for a quarter. That's what he got. In the Bible, it says, "Ask and you shall receive. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you." That's Matthew 7:7, right? So ask and you will receive. Life will pay any price that you ask of it. Raise your standards. Wayne Dyer is an amazing spiritual teacher that I follow. He's written several books on spirituality, on meditation, and amazing topics. He says, in the past, we did what we did in order to get by. So yes, in the past, our standards were low. We didn't know any better. Maybe we were naive. Maybe we weren't taught. We didn't have the experience that we do now, years later, right? So in the past, that was our standard of living then. Well, guess what, guys? Today is a new day. Today is the day of change, right? So we can raise our standards today to forever change the quality of our future, right? Because this is a constant growth. We are on this constant growth. Who wants to live, die the same way? That quote that says, on your gravestone, you have your birth date and the date of your death, when you're born and when you die. But the most important thing is the dash between. How did you live your life? What standard of living did you live by? Right? So remember, changing an organization, a business, a company, changing yourself, or even changing the world begins with the simple step of changing yourself. Because we can only change ourselves. We can't change the outside world. Can't change any other person. right? Okay, woo, who's with me, guys? So your action steps today, your action steps. The first one, I want you to write down everything that you will no longer tolerate, that you will no longer accept in your life. What will you no longer tolerate? Write that down in the areas of your finances. What will you no longer accept? In your relationships, will you no longer tolerate? How people treat you, how you treat them, okay? In your career, what will you no longer tolerate in your job? What will you no longer tolerate in your health, okay? What will you no longer tolerate in your love relationship, if you're in one? In your marriage? Raise your standards. What will you no longer tolerate in your spiritual life? Are there some things that you need to improve? Raise your standards. Okay, so that's the first one. The second step is to write down everything that you aspire to become. Raise those standards. What do you aspire to become? Write all that out specifically in detail. Guys, a side note, when you write things down, they are the chances are that you will achieve them increase dramatically. I have notebooks upon notebooks over the past 10 years, and I'm looking back and reading them, and I'm amazed at what I wrote and the life I'm currently living. From how I lived before in a victim mindset, in lack, to an abundance mindset of anything is possible. Guys, it's amazing. Write it down. You have to write these things down. If you want to change your life, if you are passionate about improving the quality of your life, you will write it down and you will achieve these goals. So remember, you can truly design the life you want to live. Raise your standards.